Welcome to the Patriots Pulse post-game show. I'm your host, John Saraditas. And as always, I'm joined by my partner, WEEI's John Lyons. John, good evening, sir. How are you?
Not too bad, John. How you doing?
As I was just saying to you, my friend, before we went live, it's just another Sunday after a Patriots loss. I mean, this is getting old, but unfortunately, we have to almost become numb to it now and get used to it because this is going to be the norm once again this season. And, John, when you look at today's game, I mean, there were a couple of times there where you thought, all right, maybe they can hang with them. I never thought going into it that they could beat them. I don't think many people thought that they could beat them. I don't think people were taking out second mortgages and putting the money on the Patriots. But you thought they could be somewhat competitive. And in spots, they were. But ultimately, San Francisco is just too good. They get Deebo Samuel back. They get George Kittle back. Those guys make a world of difference on offense. They get their mojo back. They win 30-13.
Yeah, look, they played one of the best teams in the NFL, and they got pushed around, and they turned the ball over 3 times. Bad recipe, all right, for any team, especially when you have the talent or lack of talent as the Patriots offense. I mean, again, we're talking about an offense that scored 3 points against the Jets, which is a pretty good defense, especially up front. They had 10 days off, but you're going against the San Fran defense that, even with some injuries, Nick Bosa is probably the best defensive end in the NFL. Fred Warner's the best middle linebacker in the NFL. They still have Ward in that secondary and some other good players as well. So this is a defense that's really good top to bottom talent-wise, especially up front. And we saw it was kind of one of those where even when the Patriots got good protection, Jacoby Brissett made bad decisions. That Fred Warner pick 6 stands out. But then there were other times they got bad protection, which we've seen. When they got some decent run blocking, we saw a Stevenson fumble, right? And then there were other times that they didn't get good run blocking. So it was tough to find. I mean, they had the 1 touchdown drive, but even that was abbreviated because of the San Fran fumble. It was tough to find a string of 4 or 5 plays where they kind of did pretty much everything well and move the ball down.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, coming into this game, I think a lot of people felt that in that Jets game, offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt was trying to force the issue with the receivers, trying to get the ball to Demario Douglas and Jalen Polk, and they kind of went away from what their identity has been early on this season, which is run the football, control the clock, and try to win games 17-14 like they did week 1 in Cincinnati. Unfortunately, they tried to do that today, but it worked early on that first drive. They were able to get a couple of first downs and move the ball. They didn't get any points out of it. They ultimately stalled. But then on that next possession, Stevenson fumbles. And look, that's a problem. Fact is, he's fumbled 4 times in 4 games this season, and he's your best offensive player. And if he's not on the field and he's not taking care of the ball, you have no chance. And I think, again, same old song and dance week in and week out with this football team. Offensive line not good enough, can't protect Jacoby Brissett. The lack of skill at the receiver position, real problem. They have no one as of right now that resembles anything that looks like a number 1 receiver. Not even close. They are so far away from that in their skill group that we're not going to see that guy around here until next year. And again, they're in a bind next offseason. And I know we've talked about it, it seems, every postgame show, John. But what do you do? Chances are they're probably staring at 4-13, 5-12 again. Based on the way they played the last 2 weeks, I'm not sure this team can win another 3 games this season. So they're going to go into this offseason, regardless of how they finish, with a lot of the same issues they had going into the last couple of off seasons. You don't have a left tackle. You don't have an elite level type playmaker at wide receiver. You have no big play capability in your offense. And it's a real problem. The numbers don't lie here. I mean, once again, receiving core non-factor. Take the tight ends and the backs out of it. Your leading receiver was Jalen Polk, with 3 catches for 30 yards. That's it.
Not going to do it.
It's not going to do it. They've got to be better. And I like Polk, and I think eventually once Drake May starts to be the guy, his play will certainly go up. He'll be better playing with May. But the reality is he's not a number 1 receiver. And we haven't seen Javon Baker. We don't know what's going on with him. Demario Douglas, not a number 1 receiver. We could stop pretending like we got to force touches to him and get the ball in his hands. He hasn't made an impact when he's had the ball in his hands. Your leading receiver today was Antonio Gibson, three catches for 67 yards. Most of those yards came on that screenplay there late in the fourth quarter. Ramondre Stevenson, 4 of 19, Hooper 2 for 13 in the touchdown. It's not pretty.
Yeah, you mentioned Antonio Gibson. The Patriots' two biggest offensive plays of the year are both from him. The long 45-yard run against Seattle, and then the catch and run today, which I think was 49 yards. And look, nothing against him as a player, but he shouldn't be the big play capability in your offense, right? And a running back really shouldn't be that in today's NFL unless it's Christian McCaffrey. And even him, as we saw today, they can make plenty of big plays without him in San Francisco. So, look, to put it into context, the best team you played all year, you probably played today. Like San Fran is a tremendous football team, was in overtime of the Super Bowl last year, capable of getting back there today. So they're better than pretty much anything else you're going to see the rest of this year. However, doesn't excuse 3 turnovers and you not playing well. And you mentioned Alex Van Pelt too. This is now the second game in a row I've been kind of frustrated with what they've done offensively, right? Last game, against the Jets, felt like they were forcing that play action stuff and just bad situations against a great defensive front. Brissett was constantly under pressure. Brissett got sacked 5 times in that game. It could have been 10. Then today, Gerard Mayo said in a pregame interview they were going to do more short passes today. I don't know about you. Didn't really see many of those today.
No.
I'm not saying
you can't tell if they're actually trying to throw the ball short because they can't protect the guy.
Yeah,
and I feel bad for him. It's getting to the point now where I feel bad for Jacoby Brissett. But again, you and I have coached. You can't tell what they're trying to do at times in their passing game because the guy has got pressure in his face or is on his back.
Yeah, and there were 2 situations, too, with Van Pelt. So, and Greg Olsen highlighted this on the broadcast. That very first possession, they're marching all the way down the field, 3rd and 3 at the San Fran 41, and they try to force a passing play to KJ Osborne, who, not to dump on the guy, has done nothing to impress me since he got here, and is not somebody that's known for getting open in tight situations. That's incomplete. Then you have 4th and 3 at the 41, and this was a Mayo decision, but you choose to punt. I mean, if you have 3rd and 3 there, maybe run the ball, get a yard or 2, and all of a sudden you can go for it on 4th. Maybe you go down and get a field goal at least, start the game off a little differently. And then that 4th and 1 they had in the red zone that they looked like they were going to push. Then they called a timeout. Then they call the most predictable handoff up the middle I think we've seen ever, at least in years, and they get blown up. And it's like if both of those situations from a play calling perspective were managed better, I'm not sitting here and saying they would have won the game, but maybe it's a 1-possession game and we feel a lot better about things, or maybe it's a 10-point game and we feel a lot better about things. But it's just, again, the quarterback made some horrible mistakes. The pass protection was good at times and horrible at other times. Running back made mistakes. And then your play caller made some mistakes on top of, like, they're not built to be able to overcome these mistakes, and they haven't been for a few years. So when you have all these different groups making them, that's why you get a 30-13 final. And I know we're going to get to it. Defense, not so great today either.
No, and that's supposed to be that's supposed to be the side of the ball you're going to hang your hat on. Well, the last couple of weeks, you can't.
And I know there's no Barmore, no Bentley. Like, I get it. You traded Judon. So I don't expect them to be a top 3 or 4 defense. But even without Judon, who wasn't there all camp anyway, and Barmore, I thought, hey, maybe they'd be a 10 to 12-ish range defense. I know Bentley's a loss, but you look at it. Seattle, they were bad in several key situations. Their tackling against the Jets was abysmal. And then today, multiple other just not either bad situationally or they gave up long drives. Like there was even that one drive, the Patriots make it 20-10, and then the 49ers 4 plays, 70 yards for another touchdown. Yeah. And you have a blown coverage by a safety in there. It's like at bad times too.
Right. No, I agree wholeheartedly. Lauren Gaudette joins the show as always. Thanks for checking in, Lauren. I was going to mention the pressure Brissett was in all day, 6 sacks, double-digit hits and rushes. It seems like staff is forcing a style and philosophy that don't fit their roster. Not a great roster, but it's a definition. But it's the definition of insanity.
And what's funny
Thanks
on
for
that,
checking in, Lauren.
I was thinking to myself during part of this game, like late in the first half, I'm like, oh, the pass protection's been better today. And I thought it was at times. And then we still end up with 6 sacks, including a strip sack. It's like even like that's where the expectation is that I'm like, oh yeah, it was better today. And actually, I think
it was better early. Like,
it was
early in the middle part of the game. In the fourth quarter, forget it. Bosa channeled his inner Reggie White from the Packers Patriots Super Bowl, and he just went off in the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. But But going back to the situational aspect of this game, that 4th and 1 where they tried to get them to jump, and then they came in as if they were going to run a quarterback power sneak, and then they took the timeout, and then they come back and they run an inside zone play that gets blown up for a loss. That right there encapsulates everything that's wrong with this football team right now from a coaching standpoint. At that point in the game, you are playing with house money. You're not supposed to win. Don't listen to Evan Rothstein. Don't listen to any of your other assistants. Don't get cute. Be the head coach. Make the decision. If you're going to go for it, tell your offensive coordinator on the headset, run our best 4th and 1 play there and go with it. That's it. We're going for it. Run our best 4th and 1 call you got left on the sheet. Like, for me, that's where he gets himself in trouble as a head coach, Mayo, through 4 games. They're overthinking this right now, especially those situations. It needs to be simplified. Get the analytics out of it. I want the analytics out of the game of football so bad. I hate analytics. I hate the whole concept. I think it's effing stupid. Get it out of football. This isn't baseball, okay? This is not baseball. Maybe it works in that sport, and good for that sport. I don't care. I want it out of the game that I love, because I think this is what it creates, John. It's analysis by paralysis, in essence, or maybe I'm saying it wrong. I forget the expression.
Paralysis by analysis. But
right,
yeah,
right.
But look, here's the thing, and I'm fine with analytics overall. I've used them coaching, but I think if you're going to use them, you have to be able to make quick decisions. Like, to your point,
Right.
If you feel like you should go for it and the analytics say it, don't line up for a fake tush push, call a timeout, and then call a predictable play. Just go. And we saw them in the second half on their touchdown. That was a 4th down play, and it was a good call. But like, by then, it was a little too late. And this is now the second game in a row, John. Really bad start, I would say, on both sides of the ball, but especially offensive. I mean, you look at their first 4 offensive possessions: a punt with that bad situational play calling I mentioned, a fumble by Stevenson, the pick 6, which was Brissett's worst play of the year, and then a turnover on downs that we just referenced. And by then, boom, you're down 20-0, and it felt like the game was over, and it felt like the game was over. So bad start there. And then even defensively, I know their red zone defense was good early, but you allowed a 90-yard drive on the first possession that they got a field goal, then a field goal on the second drive, which I don't blame them as much as, because that was after the fumble, but then an 80-yard touchdown drive right after that. So it's like not a good start on offense or defense now 2 weeks in a row.
No, I agree wholeheartedly.
Especially offensively.
Right. Offensively, look, this is what they're going to be all year. It's going to be tough to watch. It's going to be a struggle for them and for us. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. As I mentioned earlier, they have no playmakers on the perimeter that can make people miss in space or make a big play. You saw it today. When San Francisco needed a big play, they could hit Ayuk on a crosser. They could stretch it with Debo, and he could pick up 54 yards on a pass play.
Yeah.
When they're in the high red zone, they can hit Kittle on a corner route. So they can make those plays where the Patriots can't. And look, there are a lot of other teams, John, that can make those plays that don't have the level of talent that the 49ers do. It's just that the Patriots' talent is well below whatever the middle tier of skill talent is in the league. And again, even if you can protect your quarterback, and that's your number one issue, but even if you could protect them better, I'm not sure they have enough on the perimeter from a playmaking standpoint that it would matter that much to begin with. But I will say this, your defense has to be what keeps you in games. They have been awful the last 2 weeks. Awful fundamentally, bad run fits, bad pursuit angles, bad in coverage, not communicating. That's a real problem. But then on top of all that, your coaching is now questionable. Now you can begin to question the coaching and the decision-making. And today was another example. And look, you'd have to be naive not to think that there would be growing pains with Gerard Mayo as a rookie head coach. We all knew there would be. But now we're starting to get into a situation where, aside from my rant about analytics 5 minutes ago, we're getting into a situation now where I almost feel like they're overthinking scenarios. They're overthinking situations. I hate to beat the dead horse with the 4th and 1, but just go.
Yeah.
Just go.
Or just kick the field goal.
Or
Just
just
make a
kick the
decision.
field goal.
Do one or
Right.
the other.
But don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, and that's a sneaky key point in the game, right? Because they turn it over on downs there. They get the, what was it, 63-yard field goal before the half.
Yeah.
Great kick by Joey Sly. But
Yeah.
then you get the
Patriots record, by the way.
yeah, then you get the touchdown, open the second half. It's 20-10. It's like if you had managed that 4th-and-1 situation better, it would have been a one-possession game because either you would have kicked
Yeah.
the field goal or had a better play call and converted. So all of a sudden now maybe it's 20-13, 20-17. And again, I'm not sitting here saying they would have won the game. The 49ers are significantly better than them, but it would have been a lot closer and there would have been a lot more positives, I think, to take away from it.
Lauren checks back in. I understand going for it on 4th-and-1, and I would too, but the O-line is not great, and trying to outmuscle San Francisco is not the Pats' advantage. I may have taken points here anyway. Yeah, I don't think kicking field goals helps you today.
Yeah, but even if they had, like,
Right.
it's early enough.
I'm
that it's
okay
like,
with it, but you weren't
Yeah.
going to win this game kicking field goals.
I think the issue there was just what they actually did in their execution of it.
Yeah, and the way they managed that situation. Lauren continues, Josh Uche, I felt not as good as a traditional linebacker, but the injuries are piling up on defense, and it's been a domino effect. Yeah, I mean, you lose
They
Kyle
ran at
Duggar
him
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would run at him too. He's an
Yeah.
undersized situational pass rusher. I would run at him too.
Yeah, that
Lose-
Anthony Jennings inactive ended up being
Yeah.
I mean, not and we
Huge.
kind of figured it would be, but it ended up being
He's
huge.
their best perimeter run defender, and without
Yep.
him, it's hard to set an edge, especially against a team that lives and dies with outside zone as the base running play of their offense, as well as that zone toss. I mean, if you can't set an edge and squeeze it, you're gonna have a hard time against these guys. Kyle Duggar does get hurt today. We don't know what his status is, but that's yet another big loss on the defensive side of the ball. Secondary already thin at corner. Now all of a sudden they're starting to get thin at safety. It's a big drop off from Duggar to the next group of guys. You got Jalen Hawkins there, among others. But the bottom line is that's the other issue that this team is dealing with right now. Today you lose David Andrews, you lose Kyle Duggar. I mean, these are two big pieces of your football team that, as it stands right now, we don't know, could be out for a while.
Yeah, they've given up a lot of big passing plays this season. Like we all remember the DK Metcalf touchdown in week 2, which I know was a miscommunication, but it's a big play you gave up. They gave up several huge passing plays today, and like that's something that like if there's one thing you should be able to avoid, especially with a secondary that still has Christian Gonzalez and Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones, you should be able to avoid giving up huge passing plays, especially multiple times in a game. And look, I know they've spent a lot of resources on the defensive backfield. They still have a question at free safety because even Peppers and Duggar are more box safeties or downhill guys. Like, and you and I have talked about this many times that maybe they want to put Jonathan Jones or Marcus Jones back there just for the speed element. But I mean, that's another thing. Like you have injuries up front. The last thing you want to do is be giving up multiple big plays in a game on top of it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
You are watching the Patriots Pulse post-game show. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, John Lyons. Patriots lose to the San Francisco 49ers today, 30-13. As always, we encourage you to join the show. Feel free to comment. The show is live on X, Facebook, Twitch, and our YouTube page. You can join the conversation. Just jump into the chat feature. Tell us your thoughts. Like you've seen with Lauren here, we'll read your question on the show, and we'll interact with you. So we would love to hear from you. We know you have a plethora of other post-game options out there, but if you want a place where your voice can be heard, well, you found that place. Feel free to jump in and join the conversation. Just taking a look at the numbers here, John. Jacoby Brissett on the day, 19 of 32, 168 yards, 1 touchdown pass, 1 interception. He had a passer rating of 70.8. We're beginning to get to a point now where you have to wonder if this guy's going to be healthy in the next 2 weeks. At one point, we were talking about could he finish the season. At the way he's getting hit, I don't think he finishes the season for sure. And the way he's getting hit, he might not even be playing 2 weeks from now. I mean, he's doing the best he can. He is what he is, but he's climbing uphill here, and it's not going well. I mean, you got an offensive line that, once again, can't protect him. You're on your 4th left tackle in 4 games with Jacobs. You lose David Andrews. Nick Leverett, he gives you everything he has, but he's undersized. You have to feel for Jacoby Brissett because from a passing game standpoint, he just does not have the consistent time that he needs in the pocket to work his progression and get the ball out.
Yeah, and like to be clear, we're not excusing some of the bad plays he's made. That interception of Fred Warner was
Yeah, it's
Mac
all on
Jones.
him.
Yeah, that was Mac Jones
He
level
did have
bad.
some right.
Yeah,
He did have
but
some pressure off the left side, but that's on him.
yeah, but I think you got to understand, and you and I know that like it's the worst offensive line in the NFL, and that's not hyperbole. Like if
No.
you believe PFF, they had it ranked 32 going into the year. You just use your eyes. I mean, it's awful. They're getting in whatever stat place I mean, most places have them 45 to 50% pressure rate through the first 3 weeks heading into today. It was a little bit better in the first half today, and then it got bad again in the second. I mean, this is, and even run blocking, right? Like we've talked about, oh, well, Stevenson's putting up some numbers. Coming into this game, Ramondre Stevenson had the 5th most yards after contact in the NFL. They really haven't been run blocking that great. He's just been making guys miss, and that's been helping him pick up a bunch of yards. And of course, he's fumbled 4 times. But it's the worst offensive line in the NFL. You've got a play caller that's calling plays for the first time in 15 years. And I think we've seen some good moments and some really frustrating moments too. And then you have a skill group that I think Hunter Henry is a good player, but I think in a great offense, he's the second or third option. And right now, he's by far your first option. And then you look at Polk, there's a lot to like there, but he's a rookie that's going to take some time. Douglas is another guy. You and I love the player. We talked about him after he got drafted, and we're not surprised he's made an impact. But when you don't have anyone that can stretch the field, there's only so much that Pop Douglas can do. So it's like that's the issue here. And Tyquan Thornton, by the way, 0 impact. KJ Osborne, 0 impact. And I know they'll get Kendrick Bourne back, and I love Kendrick Bourne, the player. I do. But that's another guy.
It appears he's going to start practicing this week.
Yeah, but that's another guy. Like in a great offense, Kendrick Bourne is your second or third receiver, not your first. And that's the issue they have is all these guys are a notch or two above where they should be. And what are teams doing? And I think it's smart. The 49ers are today. They just bring pressure and say, you're probably not going to get open in time anyway. Brissett's not going to get the ball off, so we don't have to worry about it. I mean, how many times have the Patriots faced blitzes this far? So it feels like on a third or more of their dropback, teams are just blitzing because, I mean,
San Francisco is not a big blitz
and
team,
they did today because why not?
All of their coordinators have come from the Pete Carroll tree, and they're firm believers in single high coverage, rushing with your front four. Maybe you bring the 5th guy, but they're not a big, exotic, move around, multiple front, multiple body pressure team where they're going to bring 6 or 7 guys. It's very rare for them. Ideally, they'll do it with 4 or 5 guys, but they're not going to bring the house every other down. You're not dealing with the 85 Bears here and Buddy Ryan's 46 defense. So, I think to your point again, they know these receivers can't get open, and the numbers bear that out. Take the tight ends and the backs out of it. Look at your receivers today. Jalen Polk, 3 for 30. Demario Douglas, 3 for 13. Kayshon Boutte, 1 for 11. KJ Osborne, 1 for 3 yards. Tyquan Thornton, no targets, no catches.
Yeah.
I mean
we're talking about they were 3.5 yards per play today, less than half of San Francisco. I mean, that's just that's about as bad as you can get for an NFL offense. 3.5 yards a play, and by the way, good weather, right? Like good conditions. Not like they were playing in a blizzard, right? But 3.5 yards a play is just. I mean, it's abysmal, and this is what you're going to get. Think about it, 16 points week 1, 20 points week 2. 3 points week 3, and now 13 points week 4. Like this is how they're constructed. And then part of it is they're making mistakes on top of that. So this is what you're going to get. I mean, if your defense can hold the team to 10 points like they did in week 1, you'll win. If the opponent scores 20, odds are probably against you.
So here's my question to you. It's 4 games in. Are they worse this year than they were last year, 2022, offensively?
If I remember right, wasn't the 4th game last year the 38-3 Dallas loss?
Yes.
And then the 5th game was 34-0. So I'm not going to say they're worse than last year, but I don't look at them and say they're any better. Like that's the issue. So like this time through last year, I think they were 1-3, and they had that awful loss to Dallas, but you had a close loss to Philly, a close loss to Miami at that time. Of course, you'd beaten the Jets without Rodgers. So I mean, I don't know if they're worse. They're definitely not better. I don't think they're worse, though, than last year. But think about what we're talking about. Last year, you had the worst quarterback play in the NFL. You had a mediocre to bad offensive line. You had terrible receiver play. And the best you and I can sit here and say is they're not worse. So that's not a good sign in itself.
Well, and I think, again, you also have to start now to openly acknowledge, and maybe it's not the coaching. I know it's easy to blame Van Pelt, and certainly
Yeah.
Van Pelt warrants some criticism here the last 2 weeks, but we know what happened with Matt Patricia. I mean, he got shish kebabbed and ran out of town. Bill O'Brien, he didn't have the impact that the organization or the fan base thought. He
Yeah.
lasted 1 year. He's at Boston College. They're 4-1. Almost lost yesterday, though. And now you have Alex Van Pelt. But at some point, and I always say this, it's easy to blame the coach or the coaches because they're the easiest to get rid of. But at some point, you've got to hold the players accountable. And that's not, we need to start doing it here. Now, again, they're here. It is what it is. It's on Elliott Wolf and that front office now to fix this, to improve the talent on this roster. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't care who's calling plays for this team right now. They don't have talent. They don't have a left tackle. They don't have a threat within their skill group. They don't have talent. And so that brings me to my next point, Drake May, because that's the weekly conversation. Everybody's on Drake watch. When is he going to play? What week do you think it's going to be? Most of this offseason and summer, we thought it might be after their bye. Then that timeline got moved up, especially after the way he played in the preseason. Next week is a week that I think a lot of people had been targeting, John, as a possible time to start him. And then Tua Tagovailoa gets hurt. Miami's on their backup quarterback. Now, all of a sudden, that seems to be more of a winnable game. Do you think next week's the week we see him? Should they start him given the circumstances and where they are right now in terms of their offensive line and skill group? Or do you not do this to the kid? Let him wait, let him develop, and then you play him at a later time.
Yeah. First, quick aside, you mentioned the players and the lack of talent. I think the root of all this is from 2018 through 2022. They used 5 first-round picks on offense, and only one guy still here, and it's Cole Strange, who's not even playing. Like, that to me is the root of why this offense isn't good. If 3 of those 5
bad drafting the last handful of years, they're paying for it now.
Yeah, if 3 of those 5 guys are good players, we're having a totally different conversation, let alone if 4 of them were. But again, that's an aside. As far as May goes, and I'm kind of flip-flopped on this, when they drafted him, and I said this the night they drafted him, right after, I was thinking either week 9 or after the bye. I said like Halloween or Christmas, kind of those 2 times. And then over the summer, you and I were down at camp. We were watching him. We were checking in the preseason games and the joint practice, and which I know didn't go very well overall, but just we were watching him. And I was thinking, hey, week 5, week 6, after get through that San Francisco game, go against the Miami defense, which I think is overrated. And now, of course, Miami's on probably their 3rd string quarterback, or maybe that Houston game 6 weeks in, Houston, a good team, but maybe not an elite team. What I've seen from this Patriots offensive line, especially, but also, again, the inexperience of Van Pelt calling plays, the lack of big playability from any pass catcher, I'm much more now leaning towards that week 9 timeline. I mean, look, we saw Drake May get in there against the Jets, sacked twice, hit 2 other times, and that was in what, like 8 plays or 9 plays? Like, so it's just, again, to me, it's a threefold thing. Number one, is May's development himself. Like, and only the coaches can really tell that, but is he progressed enough? And some of the things you and I talked about on our shows and training camp, has he progressed in some of those areas enough that they can play him? Part 2, can this offensive line gel a little bit, maybe have a consistent left tackle and play a little bit better? And then does Alex Van Pelt get into a little bit of a better groove calling plays? And I just think we haven't seen any of those things. And the May thing, again, only the coaches can see, but the other 2 pieces, we just haven't seen that yet. So I'm not one of those people that says sit May for the whole year. And I'm not one of those people that even wants to keep sitting him, but I just think where the reality is, I'm leaning more towards week 9 now, which is a game against Tennessee, which I think is a very winnable game in the midseason. And then that too, that would give you 5 games, I think, before your bye week. Then you have a bye week kind of reset before the last 3. So I think that's, again, I know I'm flip-flopping a little, but just based off the evidence I've seen these first 4 games, I'm back towards leaning to week 9 now as opposed to week 5 or 6.
And Gerard Mayo did say after the game that Jacoby Brissett's their quarterback. So,
which is different than what he's kind of said after a couple games this year. He's been a little non-committal after 2 or 3 of the games so far, but not this time.
Right. Well, I mean, like for me, it's one of those things where when you look at how they're playing right now with the offensive line, I don't see how you could start him next week. I just don't. And Ian Rappaport actually had a tweet about that this morning. I'm actually trying to find it.
He made it seem like it'd be later in the year. Like you would
right.
see May, but it would be later in the year.
Yeah, I said something to the effect that his development is not where it needs to be right now for him to start. I don't know if that's coming from the Patriots where they're trying to temper people's expectations, so they're kind of putting that out there. But either way you look at it, whether they put it out there or not, or whether Ian Rappaport puts it out there, like you said earlier, you can see with your own two eyes, this team right now is not ready or built, even really built for a rookie quarterback to come in and play.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are going to look at Jaden Daniels and the success he's had so far in Washington, and even Caleb Williams, who has had success, hasn't been as impressive as Daniels, but he's had success. But those guys are in much better situations,
totally
specifically
different.
Williams.
Yeah.
Now,
totally
Daniels' situation isn't that much better than the Patriots, but it's still better.
Yeah, and I think
that's the difference.
The two chief advantages that Daniels has is Cliff Kingsbury's his OC. And I know we all remember Kingsbury as the failed Cardinals head coach. He's still a pretty good offensive play caller and got some good years out of Kyler Murray. And he's got Terry McLaurin, which in alone is a better player than anyone the Patriots have in their skill group.
One that's in that stratosphere.
Yeah, and their O-line, not great, but it is better than the Patriots.
It is. Lauren checks back in. I think it'll be disastrous to play May with how bad this O-line is and the talent. And if he's rushed, it won't do him any good. No, of course not. Yeah. We agree with you, Lauren. It won't do him any good. And again, I know that the zest, the zeal is there for him to play, but the reality is this is not a good situation. Oh. Again, to John's point earlier, he played 8 plays against the Jets, got sacked twice, ended up on the ground a couple of times. It wasn't pretty. You're going to see that over the course of 4 quarters if you start him on Sunday, because while that Miami defense might not be as good as the Jets defense, it's still a top 15, top 20 defense. And given the current state of affairs with this offensive line, even if they were a bottom 3rd defense in the league, they're going to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. I don't think you do it to the kid. I don't. I think you do what you said, John. You wait until week 9 to play him. Assuming you can get there. Again, I think Brissett he's the wild card in all this. You have to assume he stays healthy, and you can do that. If he doesn't, then Drake May is going to play a lot sooner than he probably should, and quite frankly, most people want to see him. Yeah. Should they sign a veteran backup? I'm at the point now, after 4 weeks, I think they should. I know they love Joe Milton and they want to hold on to him, but I don't know, man. Brissett's not going to finish the year, and if you're serious about May's development, I wouldn't play him if Brissett goes down.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a really difficult question, right? Because I think, in my eyes, May is good enough right now to be a backup. The problem is Brissett could get smoked in week 6 against the Texans, and that could be the hit that puts it over the edge, and he can't play. And then you have to play May. I'm not totally against them signing a vet. I think I'd stick with what they have there now. And if May goes in and it looks bad, then maybe add a vet at the last minute. But I'm okay with him, because then I think the problem is if you add a vet, then you're taking more and more practice reps away from May. Whereas I'd rather see a situation where, let's say, God forbid, Brissett gets hurt against Houston, May finishes the game, and then if you're still not comfortable with him just sign a vet QB that week, so that way May's not sacrificing a bunch of reps. Because at that point, it's not like you're fighting for a playoff spot. If this team was 3-1 or 4-0, then I'd say, hey, yeah, get the vet in there and May can take a back seat. But to me, it's the practice reps thing. I wouldn't want to limit those. And again, I understand your point. I would be willing to weather him coming in against Houston, handing the ball off a bunch of times, simple passes, and if needed, signing a vet that week.
Yeah, it's all fascinating. Sure to once again be a topic of conversation on Sports Talk Radio all week. Yeah.
Tuesday night, I'll be there. So,
what night is that?
I'll be Tuesday and Wednesday night this week. So
Tuesday and Wednesday night. So you'll be getting phone calls. Yeah, Lions.
Yeah, feel free to call in. John in the car. Could be you.
Yeah, but if I call in, I want to do my radio caller voice, though. I can't.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah, I can't come in as John the analyst.
No, you have to come in as John the Bobo or something like that. something like that.
Mike Bobo. I can be
Yeah.
the Georgia offensive
Yeah, I'm
coordinator.
on May
Yeah,
watch. Yeah.
I'm Mike
Yeah.
Bobo coming to you from
Yeah.
Wareham.
Speaking of that, should I do the thing and say, is the Georgia and Bama offenses better than the Patriots? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Earlier, you posed a question before we went live: is Boston College's offensive line better than the Patriots' offensive line?
You know what? Might
To which you might be able to say yes. Although they didn't play
Yeah.
great yesterday,
Yeah.
but
Normally, I scoff at those kinds of questions, but the Patriots O-line has been so bad. I'm like,
it's
maybe.
viable now. And
Yeah.
Caden Wallace got hurt again today.
Yeah, and the David Andrews injury, like, I
It's
mean,
huge.
Nick Leverett has been snapping the ball, what, 4 months? And now he might be your starting center. And again, I don't know exactly what the prognosis is for Andrews, but and Leverett survived today, but that's a bad spot to be
Yeah.
in
It's
offensively.
only going to get worse, my friend. I mean, I hate to say
Yeah.
it, but if they were healthy, I'd have a more positive outlook on
Yeah.
things, but they're not. And
Yeah.
again, their inability to make big plays. I mean, they are potentially, by the end of the year, this could be the worst Patriots offense of all of them that we've seen in franchise history. And they've had some bad offenses in franchise history. If it's not the worst, it'll certainly be up there.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think you're going to fix it in season from a personnel standpoint. You just got to keep coaching them up and keep trying to find ways to score points. And a nice little gadget today with the Demario Douglas throwback to Ramondre
Tyquan Thornton
Stevenson.
ruined it. Yeah.
Well, the officials ruined it. I mean, that you probably could have let that
Yeah.
go. Just like the Kittle block, you probably could have let that go, but they didn't. But
yeah, and I think like the one thing to keep watching for here is like, because I was thinking about, all right, last year they have a terrible quarterback situation. They end up firing their head coach as well. So last year, you got your butt kicked by Dallas by 35 points. You got your butt kicked by New Orleans by 34 points in back-to-back weeks. But a lot of the other games you kept pretty close. A lot of one possession losses.
yeah.
Now we're talking back-to-back weeks, multiple possession losses. So are they going to keep fighting? Are they going to how many more games can they win? But are they going to have some in their losses, some good fight and some close losses? Like that's something worth watching going forward too, because that's going to tell you a lot going into the offseason. Hey, do we have an issue with the character of the team? And I'm not saying they do. It's just something to watch for. Do we need to add certain guys at certain positions to, give us some more fight? Because that is one thing last year. They had those 2 awful weeks. A lot of the other weeks were just close losses where they did stupid things. Now they've had back-to-back multiple possession losses. Does that snowball? Like, do you lose a multiple possession game to, say, Houston or Jacksonville? Like, where does it kind of go, I guess, from here is something to keep an eye on.
It is, especially because last year they never quit on Belichick. They played for him.
No, they won 2 games in December.
They won 2 games in December. They went into Pittsburgh and won, and then they went into Denver on Christmas Eve and won. So
almost won in Buffalo.
Almost won in Buffalo. They kept playing for him. So I think that's a valid point, and it's worth watching as the season goes on here. Are they going to keep playing for Gerard Mayo, and what are those losses going to look like? Because you're right. I think if those losses are bad, I think it does say something about the construction of your roster and the composition of your locker. Before we go, I have to ask you about this because I saw it on X, and it was posed by someone who is currently on a post-game show right now at your station, and as somebody that at New England Football Journal we have a great deal of respect and adoration for, and that's our good friend Andy Hart. He threw this out there, and I thought it was an interesting tweet. It looks to me like you know what I'm about to ask you. He mentioned, should they make a coordinator change and possibly go to Ben McAdoo? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think, and we talked about this before the year, and nothing against Vimp, he was not their first choice. And frankly, I don't think he was their second or third choice. And we said that with their special teams coordinator too. And by the way, special teams, side note, was great today and has been, I think, much better this year, aside from that one block field goal against Seattle than it was last year and the year before. So, but Alex Van Pelt, hey, not their first choice. Don't think it was their second choice. And I'm willing to give him some grace period here. And I know his biggest job is developing Drake May, but he's got limited tools to work with. But does it feel like he's getting the most out of the tools? Like, I didn't love their game plan against the Jets and thought they were slow to adjust. I thought today some of his situational play calling was bad. And I feel like There's got to be better ways to get Demario Douglas involved than him getting 1 or 2 targets a game. There's got to be other ways to get Gibson. I mean, Gibson has your 2 biggest plays all year, and they haven't used him that much. Like, that's, again, there's got to be other ways to get some of these guys involved. So I wouldn't go there yet, John, but that's something that, I mean, if we're sitting here in week 10 saying the same thing, week 8 saying the same thing, then I would certainly consider it.
I wouldn't make a coordinator change.
Probably not till maybe after the year, but
yeah, I wouldn't do it in season. I think it sends a terrible message to your locker room, to your team. What it also says to the media and the fan base is you picked the wrong guy. So it also puts the onus back on Mayo, and it makes him look bad. So I would not make a coordinator change. If you're going to do it after the season. I will say this. I think if they did make a coordinator change after the season, and I hate doing this. I'm a coach. I don't want to speculate about anybody's job, and I'm not saying that Alex Van Pelt is going to fire. But if they did, don't be surprised if they went back to the McDaniels old Patriots system. He is a guy who played for the organization when they were winning Super Bowls. When Josh McDaniels was here, this is why Nick Haley was their first choice. I think that they wanted to keep the system in place. I would not be surprised if they did make a change at offensive coordinator down the road, that if they went back there. But again, we're not going to sit here and speculate on Van Pelt's job. I think it's foolish. I don't think it's fair. 4 games in, he's not their biggest problem.
I would agree with
couple
that.
Of game plans, but I don't think AVP is their biggest problem.
Their biggest problem is the roster. Like, no matter, and I know we have
a lot to work with.
Like, we have to do a show after every game, and I know every game's a little bit different, but their biggest problem, I mentioned before, 5 first-round picks on offense from 2018 to 2022. None of those guys is contributing. Only 1 is on the roster, right? Big free agent spending spree in 2021. Only guy from that still who's a decent player for them is Hunter Henry, right? And I'm not even and I'm not excusing Wolf totally, because he didn't do enough in the offseason to address left tackle. And I think he could have traded back into the first round and maybe got more of an impact receiver or left tackle, and he didn't. So I'm not excusing him, but this is I think you made the point earlier. They're paying now for some of the roster mistakes they made 2, 3, 4, and 5 years ago.
Bottom line, the guy that's going to be hanging out with Pat McAfee tomorrow, and the guy who's hanging out with Matt Patricia on the Underdog Fantasy Coaches Show, he's the guy that has to bear a lot of the responsibility for the current state of the roster. Because you can sit here and say whatever you want about Elliott Wolf and whether he did or he didn't do enough. The bottom line is it doesn't fall on Wolf, because he wasn't the one calling the shots for 24 years.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you. They could have done more, but
I mean, think about Sony Michel, Isaiah Wynn, N'Keal Harry, Mac Jones, Cole Strange. None of those guys played today for the Patriots, and only one of them's on the roster. Like, that's why your offense stinks. And frankly, that's why Bill's not still here. So, I mean,
ultimately, Bill the GM screwed Bill the coach over.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate everything he did. Not trying to kick him while he's out of here, but just the facts are the facts. The reason your offense stinks more than anything else is those 5. And if you want to throw Tyquan Thornton in as a 2nd-round pick, fine. Those 6 draft picks and a 5-draft span, none of them help you. And that's, again, what if 3 of those guys were good? What if 4 of them were good? Totally different situation.
Real quick, Lauren checks back in. I hate being critical of coaches, but how long are you going to run a plain game plan? Maybe some motion or stack formations, etc. But I would stick. What's that?
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but she brought that up. They don't do enough motion stuff either.
Yeah. They don't window dress enough.
Yeah.
But and it's interesting because they're running the modern West Coast offense, the Shanahan McVay version of the offense, but they don't motion nearly enough. They don't trade nearly enough. I mean, you can only shift so much. You can only window dress so much, but yeah, it definitely looks like the version that they're running is, and I said this all offseason, it's going to look more like Mike McCarthy, Kevin Stefanski than it will Shanahan McVay. He doesn't come directly from that tree. He comes from the McCarthy Packers tree. So I think that this version of the West Coast offense is going to look more like what you saw with the Packers in the 2010s than what you're seeing in San Francisco now or LA. So, I think you're seeing that. Lauren adds I would stick with AVP, but if there are any locker room issues and want to change it, McAdoo could give a boost or could blow up. But I do agree with you guys that coaches are not the issue. Yeah, they're not the issue. Thanks for checking in, Lauren. We appreciate you checking in every week. I don't think they're the issue here. I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is the roster's not good enough. And like John has been saying all show long, just look at the last 6 drafts. That's crippling this team right now.
Yeah.
End of story. N'Keal Harry, perhaps more than anyone else, is the biggest issue. Because if that's Deebo Samuel, and I've always pushed back on that argument the last few
AJ
years
Brown
when people made it. But if it was one of those other guys in that draft, DK Metcalf, it could be a different story. And again, but all that being said, the offensive line's a disaster too. That needs to be fixed as well. Belichick tried to fix it. Bottom line is he didn't pick the right guys. And ultimately, here we are. All right. Well, John, thank you for taking the time as always, my friend. Great stuff as always. Let's do this again next week after the Miami Dolphins come to town.
I'll be here. Hopefully we'll have a better game to talk about.
Yeah, that would be nice. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Patriots Pulse post-game show. Patriots lose 30-13 to the San Francisco 49ers. For John Lyons, I'm John Cernino.